Kamashumi mathandathu anesithende kumhla kamashumi mabini anesibhozo kweyamnqungu kumhlaba wasemthatha wasenzela indaba uJoji madoda wasenzela indaba uNonhla madoda wasalela ingqanga wazalela iAfrika wazalela ihlabathi silapha kaloku namhlanje sizongqina vumani kaloku nam sivuye sithi ngenene umawethu ebeyindoda kwacaca kaloku ubukrelekrele kwakhe kwasebuncincini wahlamngela waphuma emagqabini madoda wenyuka wabheka kwelaseNgilane wafika eNgilane wayiphakamisa iflag yoMzantsi Afrika aqala amadlakusha aqina athi ngenene leti ingqondo ayinabalala mntu angqina madoda athi ngenene leti ingqondo ayinabalala mntu simbonile kaloku umfoka Myosi ephethe impi madoda ephethe impi madoda evungulula izifo zabampofu evumbulula izifo zangabathathi ntweni wayinqoba madoda impi wayibeka ecaleni simbonile umfoka Myosi phantsi kwentaba zokhahlamba madoda edibanisa ama-Afrika esithi zani ma-Afrika yeyele ageqeka madoda aphuma ama-Afrika. Simbonile izingqi zakhe madoda. Mhle dibanisa amadoda kwelase-Addis Ababa. Yatshintsha imithetho yatshintsha. Yatshintsha imithetho yatshintsha. Lazuza ilizwe le-Afrika. Bantu osopolitiki bebengayinakanga i-rheumatic heart disease. Baguquka madoda. Uqhubekile kaloku umfo kaMyosi kweli ziko lokuxelenga lase-UCT. Wayenza i-transformation yabonakala. Siyavuma kaloku madoda. Sisirhwarhube kambese. Kambe lihambe lirhwequ loBhungane. Ngumashwabada owashwabada impondo nenkomo zayo. Ewe kaloku madoda. Ebengawenzi yedwa lo msebenzi. Ibikhona intombi kwaKhumalo. Into ezidla umntu zibe zimyenga ngendaba. Siyavuma maKhumalo usebenzile. Xolodani ke ngoko nivuye. Yeah.
Thank you very much to our Umbongi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mashiko. I'm one half of the program directors for today. Just by way of orientation, this program has been broken down into two parts. So the first part was the UCT Libraries Legacy Project, which commenced at 4 o'clock, concluding with an exhibition. Those of you who haven't seen the exhibition, I encourage you to please walk through. It's a permanent exhibition in honor of Professor Bongani Myosi. We are now about to enter into the second part of the program, which essentially mainly posits around the named Bongani Myosi lecture. Before we get going, there are two announcements that I'd like to make. The first is that this program is being live streamed on UCT's YouTube video. And so for your friends and colleagues who are not able to join us today, please text them, WhatsApp them, and tell them that they can watch live. The second is that for those of you who are guests here and not familiar with the medical school, the bathrooms can be found in that corner there of the foyer. Now, before we get going, I would like to call up on Mrs. Debbie Budlender, who is a deputy chairperson of the UCT Council. She has a long history serving on the council, initially as a member and currently as deputy chair of council. Having served on 2 terms with Prof. Myosi, we are delighted that she's here today and has agreed to do the official welcome. Please, Ms. Budlender.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be able to welcome you all to the inaugural annual event. I'm standing here because unfortunately Sipho, the chair, Sipho Pitjana, couldn't make it. So I'm getting a delegated honor. But he does send his greetings and really would have liked to be here. I did get given a list of the people I should mention, especially in the welcome. But I've seen people of equal status who in the audience who are not on my list, so I'm not going to read out names. So I'd like to, most importantly, the Myosi family, UCT leadership, UCT Ombud, who I saw, okay, some UCT council members beside myself, and then we have special external guests, people from the Bongani Myosi Foundation, our guest speaker, who we borrowed from Stellenbosch, and Glenda, yes, okay, Glenda from the Medical Research Council. But I want to say welcome to those people, welcome to everybody else in this room, and welcome to everybody else who's somewhere out there listening in on the live streaming. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of them who are listening now and who might listen later, because Bongani was a friend and a collaborator and to very, very many people, and had even more admirers who might have not known him personally. So through the live stream, we have present the people here, people elsewhere in Cape Town, people elsewhere in South Africa, people elsewhere in Africa, and people beyond that. That was who Bongani was. So 28th January, it's an auspicious day. It's the day on which Bongani, my way to Myosi, was born. We and others knew him as an outstanding clinician, scientist, friend, or family. His commitment to academic excellence, collaboration, social transformation, and from my side, I can say to good governance, which maybe not everybody saw. He influenced and inspired people in this hall and beyond. His middle name, Mawetu, was prophetic. He's somebody of us. And it was a signal from the start of how Bongani would be able to make us feel he was with and for us all. But other people are going to speak on his legacy, thank goodness, because there's too much to encapsulate. So this is a celebration, is a collaboration between UCT Libraries, which was mentioned, Faculty of Health Sciences, and Bongani's family. Thank you. We want to, through the event, which is the first of annual lectures going forward, we want to acknowledge and celebrate the vision, impact, and influence of the late Professor Bongani Myosi, his academic endeavors, how he influenced students academically and in other ways, in the health science faculty, and far beyond. And as I personally know, his influence went beyond the narrowly academic. And then we wish to honor and preserve his legacy of African-led academic excellence, his aspirations and collaboration in teaching, learning, and research, and his message to lift as you rise. It's a message for which he provided an excellent example in his too short life. So enjoy, celebrate, and please turn off your cell phones if you haven't done so already.
Thank you, Debbie. I would like to echo Debbie's words and extend a hearty welcome to each and every one of you here today. Thank you for being with us today on this truly special day. Today, the 28th of January, marks an important landmark in the life of the Myosi family, Professor Myosi's closest friends, colleagues, the faculty, and indeed the university. It would have been Bongani's 53rd birthday today, thus marking the second anniversary of his birthday since his passing. You will remember that just almost a year ago, and for very good reason, the faculty elected to have a reflective memorial service, which was felt or had been hoped would have been cathartic and bring us closer as a community. This year, it was felt that on the anniversary of his birthday, it would be appropriate to celebrate the fullness of his life. I would like to thank the faculty, the Myosi family, Carolyn Williamson, who has spearheaded these projects and has understood the importance. Thank you, Prof, for recognizing the importance of these events in the history of this faculty and for her unwavering support throughout. Today, we take the time to reflect on his lived experience, the values he subscribed to, and to thank the universe for a life well lived. Professor Myosi's most enduring legacy was his desire for excellence. He expected this of himself and of others. He lifted as he rose. Bongani's legacy is expansive. It is in the way he lived his life, in the things that he did, in the way that he did them, and the lasting impact they have had and continue to have, even after his passing. He lived by the principles such as dare to dream and believed that there is enough room under the African sky for everyone, and other such values that have been so beautifully captured in the exhibition. All of these reflect the core of his lasting legacy, the values that we ourselves can adopt or aspire to live our best lives. The faculty and the university aims to honor him through a collection of projects under the banner of the Bongani Myosi Legacy Project. These include the library project, which Ujala will speak to in a few minutes, the Myosi Research Collaborative, the Bongani Myosi Foundation, to name a few. In addition, it is anticipated that today's launch will mark the first of the University of Cape Town annual named lecture, pending following the correct procedures and acquiring the requisite approvals. There is so much goodwill. As a result, the legacy project is growing at an unprecedented pace. As individuals, as faculty, as a university, and as a country, it is our duty and honor to keep the legacy of Professor Bongani Myosi alive.
Thank you, Mashiko. In serving on the committee that put together this program, I learned a very important lesson. And that is that when the items on the program are put on the list, don't be on leave. Or you might find yourself quite involved. Everyone in clinical and scientific research will know from tough experience that the shadow of Murphy's Law always looms large as one sets about going about their work, and that what can go wrong frequently does. Therefore, the key to success in research, as it is in many aspects of life, is as much about resilience, perseverance, and having the determination to overcome obstacles as it is about the ability to ask the right questions and generate great hypotheses. Professor Myosi's famous and often repeated Bongani-ism on this very issue was that if we are to succeed in our research endeavors, then it is imperative that we learn to make lemonade when presented with lemons. So, presented with the most bitter of lemons, in the form of the loss of our beloved mentor, supervisor, collaborator, and friend in 2018, the question a group of us challenged ourselves with over the last 18 months was how we can turn this awful lemon into lemonade. And the answer to that was we could try to do so by contributing to keeping alive the amazing legacy of this humble giant of a person. Fortunately, one thing about giants is that where they have tread, they leave behind big footsteps and large footpaths so that others can try and follow, even if the boots that they walked in were too large to wear. And of course, as we all know, this specific giant of our time also left us the gift of a clear vision of a healthier, wealthier, and happier Africa. So our attempt at making lemonade was to form the Bongani Myosi Research Collaborative for cardiovascular disease in Africa. The collaborative brings together active programs of research in the area of cardiovascular disease that are fundamentally aligned with Professor Myosi's ethos and values under one proverbial roof, with the aim of working in concert with partners from the rest of the continent and around the world to complete Bongani's many long-term visionary objectives, such as working to rid Africa of rheumatic heart disease, reduce the burden of heart failure from heart muscle disease, and improve outcomes of tuberculous heart disease. And while doing so, build and develop a large cadre of health researchers across South Africa and the continent who will multiply the capacity and efforts and so help solve Africa's health problems. Other very important milestone achievements in the multi-pronged Myosi legacy projects and initiatives over the last 18 months include that there have been a significant number of scholarships in his honor. These include the Bongani Myosi Impilo Student Bursary Fund to assist UCT Faculty of Health Sciences undergrad students in financial need. The Bongani Myosi National Health Scholars Program, an initiative by the National Health Research Committee and a partnership between the National Department of Health, the Public Health Enhancement Fund, and the South African Medical Research Council. The objective is to fund the training of 1,000 PhDs in health and clinical research over the next 10 years. Then there's the Bongani Myosi Netcare Clinical Scholarship, designed for medical specialists who wish to pursue doctoral and postdoctoral research. Then there's the Bongani Myosi UCT PHRI Fellowship, which is a partnership to train clinical researchers between the Department of Medicine at UCT and the Population Health Research Initiative at McMaster University, Canada. And there are others in the pipeline. Over the 18 months since his passing, several major global cardiovascular society congresses and meetings have also honored him by creating named lectures, symposia, and sessions. These include the International Society of Hypertension, which had a Bongani Myosi Memorial Lecture in Beijing 2018, November. The South African Heart Association, which now has an annual Bongani Memorial Lecture at its annual meeting in October. The Pan-African Society of Cardiology, which now has an annual Bongani Myosi Symposium within its Congress. The European Society of Cardiology and World Heart Federation had a Bongani Myosi Memorial Lecture at their combined Congress in Paris in August of 2019. Then the American Heart Association had a named lecture at their Congress in Philadelphia, November 2019. I can proudly say that Professor Liesel Zulker was honored to deliver that lecture. And the meeting now has an annual Bongani Myosi session on disparities in global cardiovascular disease. And then last but not least, the Department of Medicine here at UCT at their annual research day had its inaugural annual Bongani Myosi Memorial Lecture, which Ambroise Wancombe, Professor Ambroise Wancombe, Deputy Dean of Research, again was honored to deliver. Then to say that the upcoming issue of the South African Medical Journal, which will be published to coincide with this celebration, will be dedicated to manuscripts which were in the process or incomplete in July of 18 at the time of his passing. And with that issue, there will also be a supplemental Festschrift, excuse my German, with a collection of essays and learned papers written by academics and colleagues to honor him. Finally, I think it is important to acknowledge that an unprecedented 8 of some of the most prominent high-impact medical journals in the world, including The Lancet, the British Medical Journal, the European Heart Journal, Circulation, the Journal of American College of Cardiology, and the Cardiovascular Journal of Africa, published full-page Bongani Myosi obituaries, which will bear testimony to his legacy of values, vision, humanity, and achievements through the test of time. Thank you, all of you who have contributed to these many endeavors, and long may your efforts continue. Thank you. Can I invite Ujala to come up and join us again?
Thank you, Impiko and Mashiko. Good evening, colleagues. I had the privilege of sharing with those of you who attended the launch of the bibliography at the Health Sciences Library, the impetus behind the Bongani Myosi Legacy Project. And when I think back to the issue of planting a seed, I remember when I first met Lanshlanshla, she looked at me and thought, what am I going to do and how am I going to help her? But I'm very pleased to say that over the course of 12 months, we were able to give meaning and expression to the Bongani Myosi Legacy Project that actually was born in UCT Libraries, Health Sciences Library. When I listen to the footprint of Professor Myosi's reach across the world, the idea of locating his legacy within the health sciences faculty gave rise to lots of questions and how are we going to do it? And so that we do not end up having a contestation. And so the most neutral and objective space is a university library. It is the heart of the academic project. It is the place where students gather for refuge, for respite, for collaborative learning, for reflection, etc. And so the idea of merely hosting his accolades grew into something that is going to have a lasting meaning and a tangible interpretation of his legacy within the health sciences faculty. And it is our privilege to share with you that we will be giving expression to this by refurbishing, redesigning, reconceptualizing identified spaces within the library. And you're welcome to cast your eye over the exhibit that's been put up in the foyer of the library, and you'll be able to see how we intend changing some of these spaces. The second aspect of this was the naming of the Health Sciences Library. It's the one building or one entity that didn't have a name. It was always called the Health Sciences Library. And so we said, instead of naming a room or naming something, why don't we name the library? And so the idea was mooted with the faculty, and UCT Libraries, in collaboration with the faculty, put in a submission. And we're very pleased to announce that the Health Sciences Library will be known as the Bongani Myosi Health Sciences Library with effect from July. And in anticipation of this naming, we decided to mount a permanent exhibition that includes the areas and the scope and breadth of the research endeavors taken by the collaborative, together with his journey to the person that he eventually became, but also embedding some of his key values so that whoever traverses this corridor will hopefully imbibe those values of social justice, of integrity, transformation, and many more. And the third aspect of our legacy, and so thus far I think we've achieved 2 out of the 3, is the Bongani Myosi Bibliography. We've launched the special edition, a hand-tooled, beautiful edition of his bibliography, which includes 400 entries. And we published the online version this evening. And I do invite all of you to please go and have a look at it. And all subsequent publications will be added to this online version. So colleagues, in terms of UCT Libraries taking the lead in the Bongani Myosi Legacy Project, I present to you these 3 very, very important ways in which Professor Myosi is going to be remembered for as long as these buildings stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jala. I'm now going to call on Mr. Sizwe Ngasana. He has an illustrious career as an executive business accountant and consultant. He's the founding partner of Sizwe Nzaluba Gobodo, which is the 5th largest audit firm in South Africa. He served as CEO at a couple of companies, most notably at Telkom, where he was responsible for its listing both in Johannesburg and at the New York Stock Exchange. He has served as chairman on various foundations and trusts, including the National Education Collaboration Trust, the Ikusasa Student Financial Aid Program, which supports and funds students who come from poor and missing middle backgrounds. Sizwe is now a social entrepreneur who recently founded Future Nation Schools, which is a chain of affordable private schools in South Africa. He also founded the Sifiso Learning Group, which is involved in EdTech, academic and non-academic publishing, and real estate. He has also been conferred with honorary degrees by the universities of Fort Hare, the Durban University of Technology, the University of Johannesburg, and Walter Sisulu University. Today, he will speak to us in his capacity as the chairperson of the Bongani Myosi Foundation. Mr. Nwasana, please join us.
Thank you very much, Machiko. Thanks very much, Mpiko. Really is a privilege and honor for me to be here representing the Bongani Myosi Foundation. And let me start off by acknowledging the Myosi family. It really is a special honor and privilege to see you here again, but also to be part of this really amazing day, which is a day that God made on which Bongani was born. So it's a very, very, very special day. I'd like to obviously also acknowledge the leadership of the university, friend, Vice Chancellor Mamokgethi Pakeng, Professor Pakeng, that I've worked with for many, many, many years, from my days at Telkom, actually. So I have to greet my wife, who's Dr. Judith Lamine, who is the Chancellor of Wits University, who's also here today. And of course, the leadership of the university and all our distinguished guests. Judy and I have known Bongani forever. In fact, a lot of people confused me to be a medical student because, like a lot of young people, I was a struggling would-be accountant who was hustling, studying at UNISA. And instead of living and studying at home, Mlazi, out of Durban, I started going to the medical school, and initially I would arrive on a Friday and study there. A Friday became a Saturday, a Friday and a Saturday, and it became a Friday up to a Sunday, and then I just ended up living there. We don't tell our children this, as well as our grandchildren, because I was often shouted off each time it was university vac, because suddenly I showed up with my bags, and my parents would like, "Where are you coming from? You've been away for 3 months," and suddenly you're showing up. So we knew Bongani and Nonhlanhla from when they were much younger than us. They were much younger than us at university. So even when they got married, the only thing we could afford was to go to Checkers, buy a tea set. And I'm really pleased that they still have the tea set. Those tea sets that come in boxes. Yes, so that's the only one we could afford to get as a gift when they got married with Bongani. But I'm here today representing the Bongani Myosi Foundation, because you've seen just the legacy projects that the Bongani Myosi already has. Bongani was larger than life, and his reach extended well beyond our borders. So Nonhlanhla and the family thought it was important not just to preserve the legacy of Bongani Myosi, but to promote what Bongani Myosi really stood for. So Professor Nonhlanhla Khumalo is a founder of the Bongani Myosi Foundation, and Mr. Sipho Myosi, brother to Bongani, is one of the trustees. So I'd like to take this privilege and honor to introduce the trustees of the Bongani Myosi Foundation that have the privilege of leading as a chairman. And that includes Professor Ngoza Lova, who's the Dean of Health Sciences at UKZN. If you could just raise your arm, please, Ngoza, she's here. And as well as Mr. Lwando Bantam. Lwando is an executive director at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. So he's raising his arm, he's over there. He's one of our trustees. We have Mr. Mlamli Boy, who's an engineer as well as the CEO of Santec. So you wouldn't get your signal on your radio or TV if Santec didn't exist. So he's the CEO of that entity. Unfortunately, we had a trustees meeting today, our second trustees meeting, and unfortunately had to go back because it's Mlamli's wife's birthday. Otherwise, he would have been in big trouble if he missed the evening dinner for the family. We also have Gloria, some of you know Tomato Sirobe, who's the founder of Women Investment Portfolio, one of our really esteemed entrepreneurs in the country, who unfortunately, well, fortunately for us as a country, our President Ramaphosa, has now started as chairman of the African Union, and he sought a few people, about 5 people, including Tomato, to help him with his job as he takes over the chairman of the African Union. So that's why Tomato couldn't join us today. We have Nazrim Bao, who's an advocate, because obviously one of the main functions of the foundation is going to be to protect the intellectual property as well as the trademarks and everything that has to do with Bongani Myosi. Because as we all know, we would like to work in partnership, particularly with the University of Cape Town, with other institutions. And there are a lot of people who mean good, but there are also a lot of people who do not mean good. As we all know, if you have a name as big as Bongani, before you realize it, there are people who go and register, for instance, domain names in your name, and you want to get them, you're going to buy them from them. So as a foundation, we are very serious in making sure that the legacy of Bongani Myosi is not only protected, but is preserved and promoted in a proper way that preserves what Bongani stood for. And as you know, it is important to have lawyers in some cases to help us with this. And then, myself, and I'm more commonly found in a classroom teaching grade 8, 9s, and 10s these days. That's something that I love. That's what I do. I'm a school teacher. We also thought it was important because, once you start managing money, it is important to have people with the right skills that understand what this is about. So we have Professor, I forgot to put Professor, where's Lumide? I forgot to put Professor. He's one of the youngest professors in the country, but also the Dean of the College of Accounting at UNISA. So he's one of our members of the Finance Committee. And we have Michelle Barnes, who's also sitting there, if you can raise your arm, a member of the Finance Committee, but a CA, a member of the finance team at the Alan Gray Foundation. So we have a group of really preeminent, serious people who are going to make sure that we work with institutions, UCT and others, in promoting the legacy of the Bongani Myosi Foundation. And as we know, I won't really, cover this. It's been covered by Professor Mpiko and Professor Sitedi. But what is important is for us to recognize just how larger than life Bongani was. He was a global citizen, as we know. We already have been approached by, for instance, some international universities, Oxford, where Bongani was, as well as Harvard. He did the AMP at Harvard Business School, universities in Australia. So it is important, especially given the person that he was, who was an intellectual, who was a scholar, who was brilliant in academia, who was empathetic, who was a friend, who was fun, that we preserve and promote what Bongani stood for. But Bongani was a family man, as we all know, as I related the story of the tea set. We just know how he built his own family. He saw this relationship with Nonhlanhla as a collaborative thing, which is an amazing thing, because they were building an institution, even though it was a domestic institution. And he was very successful at doing it. He was an administrator, a medical researcher, and educator. So all of these things, we've got to make sure that we protect, we promote, we advance what Bongani Myosi really stood for. So the overall goal of the foundation is to not just celebrate his life, and obviously his birthday is particularly important, and honor his legacy, but also to support a lot of these programs that Bongani stood for and what he promoted. Professor Mpiko has already talked about the scholarship programs. And thanks to Professor Ndlova from UKZN, around media this year, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, in the Health Sciences faculty, is going through a process. As we all know, there are processes that have got to be followed. But they are naming a lecture hall in his honor, in Bongani's honor. And that's quite an important thing. So as a foundation, we want to make sure that we can work together with institutions that see and are continuing to promote the legacy of Bongani Myosi. Today, we made a decision as a foundation that we, obviously with the support of our funders and so on, because of the impact that Bongani had, especially around not just our borders, even though obviously we start with our borders. And we're going to have an academic prize in health sciences at all the 9 medical schools in the country, because excellence and what Bongani stood for and support in terms of research and scholarly activity is particularly important. So by the end of the year, we will have launched the prize, obviously in consultation with all the 9 faculties of health sciences in the country. The number of overseas initiatives that we have identified, obviously some of them we have people who are reaching out as they know that there is a formal platform now that is going to be a custodian of the Bongani Myosi intellectual property and legacy and so on that are reaching out. For instance, there's an opportunity for both Oxford, so this is Oxford and Harvard, it's not Oxford Harvard, it's Oxford and Harvard, to work together with them in promoting the legacy of some of the things that Bongani did. Like for instance at Harvard, when Bongani was doing his AMP at Harvard, he was chosen to present the graduation lecture by all the students. And a lot of those people who were his colleagues are still today wanting to support what he stood for because they saw this amazing person. And this was completely outside health sciences. It was in the Harvard Business School. So it just shows the kind of person that he was. And that's what we want to do. As we all know, Bongani was really particularly interested in even just prevention, especially the issue of rheumatic fever and heart valve disease, pericarditis, and so on. And we want to advance this, especially working with the public health system, because he had found very easy solutions for how children, especially young children, can be treated so that you avoid the problem of heart muscle disease or valves and that kind of thing. So we are seeking to work with the DOH, with the Department of Basic Education, to see how this can be promoted and how we can minimize or stop even, the incidence of treatments that could have been avoided simply because people didn't know that if you have a sore throat, it may actually mutate and become a much more complicated, condition. And And in mathematics, I had a number of discussions because Bongani knew that I was involved in education. Him and I had a number of discussions around what do we do about the education of mathematics in the country. He had an idea. He wanted to start in the Eastern Cape to identify really great teachers in mathematics and see how we could use those teachers to actually train other mathematics educators in the country so that our children can benefit. I'm not sure if some of you know, just this year, the Minister of Basic Education announced the results on the 7th of January this year. It was great, 81-point-something% pass rate, out of which about 190,000 of our learners got bachelor's passes. But what that information did not tell us is the fact that out of the almost 730,000 young people who wrote matric, only about 77,000 passed matric with a 40% plus, and less than half of that passed mathematics with a 60% plus. Okay, so if you think about it, 730,000 children writing matric, and the country is going to have to produce doctors, engineers, data scientists, actuaries, accountants, you name it. And as you know, all universities in those sciences, in those skills, require at least a minimum of 60%. Now, we've got to only try and get these skills out of just over 30,000 young people. So it's a real issue. And Bongani understood this problem that, yes, you can deal with research at universities, you can deal with those that have been admitted into medicine, as an example, and make them researchers. But unless we're solving the issue of the pipeline, and mathematics is key, we're not going to address this issue in the country. So as a foundation, we have identified a number of opportunities to advance that work of how we can increase the number of our children in the country that are passing and doing mathematics, especially given the trend line, because what is happening, the trend line of young people, learners that are doing mathematics, not only is it small, not only are we talking about 37,000 that pass mathematics with the 60% plus, but the number is declining, which is a really worrying factor. Why? Because schools are incentivized to produce quantities, in other words, volume. So kids are being channeled to maths literacy, which, as we know, can never produce the kind of priority skills that this country needs. So there's a major crisis, and Bongani was extremely concerned and worried about. So we want, as a foundation, to promote this, not only in rural areas, but also in townships, in all the poor schools and so on. So the foundation has been started. It's being a process of being, completely registered with the Master of Supreme Court. There are processes that we have to follow. Our auditors are PwC, who are, thanks to PwC, have agreed to do the audit pro bono. And we already have our lawyer who's registering the foundation, who's agreed, because obviously we need bank accounts to run the affairs of the Bongani Myosi Foundation. So Jonathan Mott has agreed to make his trust account available in the meantime, because, for instance, if we're raising money for the prizes, for any other activity to run the affairs, we've got to have a bank account that people have confidence in, that you put your money there. There are people of serious stature who are going to make sure that we look after the money. We're going to deploy it where the money is supposed to go and make sure that we can account for each and every cent that is raised to advance the legacy project of the Bongani Myosi Foundation, as well as others. So that's really who we are, and we are really honored. And thanks to the family for inviting some of us to be part of this amazing journey, part of this amazing legacy. Thank you.
I'm delighted that the Faculty of Health Sciences Orchestra, which is composed of staff and students, have agreed to join us again this year under the capable leadership of Sean Carson. Sean, would you like to come up and just tell us a bit about the piece you're about to play? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a short symphony for you. It's known as the Venetian Symphony, Sinfonia Veneziana, by the Italian composer Antonio Salieri. And I hope you enjoy.
Professor Bongani Myosi's contributions to scholarship, science, academia, society, and individual lives are immeasurable. While we recognize his contributions as a mentor, a coach, a supervisor, and as a teacher, he himself had many mentors who shaped his thinking, his ideas, and his view of the world. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce someone that Professor Myosi considered a mentor. Professor Jimmy Volmink is the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at the University of Stellenbosch and professor in the Department of Global Health at Stellenbosch University. Before this role, he was the Glaxo Wellcome Chair of Primary Health Care in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Cape Town. And might I add that there are many in our midst who have yet to recover from his departure. He has previously served as a founding director of Cochrane South Africa, as well as the Director of Research and Analysis at the Global Health Council in Washington, DC. He obtained his Bachelor of Science and his MBCHB degree from the University of Cape Town, and a Diploma of Child Health from the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa. After 12 years in clinical practice, he received a Harvard South Africa Fellowship and obtained a Master's of Public Health degree from Harvard University. Subsequently, he was awarded the prestigious Oxford Nuffield Medical Fellowship to study at Oxford University, where he obtained a DPhil degree in epidemiology. Professor Volmink is widely recognized for his contributions to evidence-based medicine. He is an elected member of the Academy of Science of South Africa and an elected fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. He has received the Leverhulme Medal for Distinguished Contributions from the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and a recognition award for his contributions to evidence-based medicine and healthcare in Africa from the South African Medical Research Council. Like the late Professor Bongani Myosi, Professor Volmink was a Nuffield Fellow at Oxford. And on his return from Oxford University, Professor Myosi adopted Professor Volmink as a mentor. And there were elements of Bongani's leadership style that he credited to Jimmy. During their friendship, they published many important publications that have had a bearing for society in South Africa and beyond. I invite Professor Volmink to share his reflections on their professional relationship and friendship and to deliver the inaugural Professor Bongani Myosi Memorial Lecture.
Thank you so much, Ntusi, for that extremely generous introduction. The Myosi family, distinguished guests, the Deputy Chair of Council, as well as other members of the UCT Council, the leadership of the university and of the faculty, colleagues, students, friends, good evening. I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity to address you on this very special occasion. It's a very moving occasion. And it is a real honor to have been invited to deliver the inaugural Bongani Myosi Memorial Lecture. Now, my friendship with Bongani is without doubt one of the greatest blessings I've enjoyed in life. For more than 2 decades, we enjoyed many happy moments together. We shared various ideas and opinions, some good ones, others completely wacky. We also engaged in political debate. We talked about research quite a lot. We planned and executed some research projects together. And importantly, we talked about family life and friends and enjoyed many good laughs together. One of my abiding memories was of the few eventful years during which we played squash together. Now, the less said about that, the better. This was usually about once a week. In the beginning, our skills were more or less at a similar level, not very high, which meant basically that luck more or less decided who would win on the day. However, at some point, Bongani seemed to be falling behind on the scoreboard. And so he decided, without consultation, to hatch a plan. He rounded up a group of his young, fit cardiology registrars and basically turned them loose on me. The logic was, evidently, that these young warriors could soften me up sufficiently so that when he got to me, perhaps the outcome would be somewhat better for him. My valiant attempt to hold up against this onslaught, unfortunately proved to be short-lived, highly ineffective, and painful. And my humiliation was made complete when a few weeks later, I ended up on my back in hospital with a prolapsed lumbar disc. Following my recovery, and after having had many good laughs about the silliness of it all, when Bongani and I decided that it was in my best interest to engage in more age-appropriate activities in the future. So today, as you know, we celebrate the legacy of just a great guy, a wonderful man. A legacy which is so large and so multi-layered that it is really difficult to know where to start talking about it. And I certainly will not do justice today to the extent of that legacy. For some, the legacy is about him having had a brilliant mind and his many contributions as a cardiovascular researcher, and those are the things that are important. And so we could talk about his research on TB pericarditis, which culminated in a landmark article in the New England Journal of Medicine. We could discuss his work on rheumatic heart disease and the leading role he played in setting up the Global Rheumatic Heart Disease Registry. Another focus could be his work on the genetics of cardiomyopathy and the discovery of the gene responsible for sudden death in young people and athletes. And yet for others, it's more about the leadership roles he played in academic medicine. We could talk about his legacy as the head of UCT Department of Medicine, as the president of the South African Colleges of Physicians, as the president of the Pan-African Society of Cardiology, and so forth and so on. However, today I thought I should perhaps limit myself to drawing attention to what I really regard as the most unique and significant aspect of his legacy. That is his contribution to the development of people. This is a theme that emerges in many, if not all, the tributes I've read about him. And also in the conversations that I've had with many of you following his passing. It's also something which resonates with what I experienced during the time that we were together as friends and colleagues. One of the tributes I co-authored with people you know very well here talks about, it states the following. It says, perhaps one of Bongani's most remarkable legacies is his dedication to mentoring junior clinician scientists and building research capacity in Africa. Professor Myosi was truly remarkable in his ability to lift people up. He had a generosity of spirit, which is rarely seen in academia in particular. And that made a world of difference to me and to you and to many people around this country, the continent, and in many parts of the world, as we've already heard. Why is mentorship so important? I'd like to share with you a personal story. One day during my second year at this medical school, I was walking past the old physiology building. That's before the big grand institute was built. When suddenly I heard a man call out, "Good afternoon, how are you today?" Distracted by my own thoughts, I didn't at first realize that the person was talking to me. But when I finally did look up, right there in front of me, looking back at me, was one of the most eminent professors at the medical school, Professor Willem Gievers, a person who is well known to many of you. He didn't have a clue who I was, other than that I was a medical student. And possibly that the giveaway was that I smelled like cadaver. When I recovered from the shock of what had just happened, I blurted out something I think fairly nonsensical before saying that I actually wasn't feeling very well. So briefly, I had recently, a few months before that, lost my sister in a car accident. The driver of the car responsible for the crash had been under the influence, and unfortunately the police had failed to arrange for a blood sample to be taken from him within the legally stipulated period. As a result, his lawyers were contesting the prosecutor's claim that his blood alcohol had exceeded the legal limit at the time of the accident. The court hearing was then in progress, and my thoughts were really around those things that were happening. To my surprise, this eminent professor took the time to engage me in conversation about this issue. He then suggested that we go to this library that we've just come from, and we spent an hour together looking up information about the physiology of alcohol absorption so that he could give me useful information to take back. During the rest of my undergraduate studies, I didn't ever formally meet with him ever again. I didn't see him very much, but when I did bump into him, he always asked how things were going, asking about whether I was coping with my studies, how my family was doing, and always leaving me with some words of encouragement. And long after leaving medical school, we have stayed in touch. I've sought his advice on many issues, and he has served as a sponsor and promoter of my career development in various ways, whether by putting my name forward for membership of committees, informing me of job opportunities, or nominating me for various awards. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of mentorship in action from my own experience. And I have come to believe that when someone you look up to takes a special interest in your well-being, it can be the difference between success and failure. Some years ago, I saw the cover of the Harvard Review, and the words that screamed out on the cover were, "No one makes it without a mentor." I can tell you with some certainty that I would not have made it had it not been for the few people during the course of my career who chose to show an interest and to believe in me. Mentors fulfill many roles in our lives. They help us define our goals and aspirations. They provide guidance and advice. They challenge our thinking and help us clarify our thoughts and ambitions. They stretch us. They also serve as role models of leadership, of ethical behavior, and of excellence. But for me, the most important role of a mentor is the one captured by someone called Catherine Schruber. In one of her articles on mentorship, she writes, I quote, "Mentors are people who can see more in you than you see in yourself. Effective mentors are so unshakably convinced that we have greatness in us, and their vision of what is possible is so clear and powerful that they wind up convincing us too." For many of you here this evening, and for countless others, Professor Bongani Myosi was that kind of mentor. Among the many tributes that have been written about him, I can mention a few related to this particular point. For example, one person wrote, "Increasingly over the years, Bongani has stood out from everyone else in our field. The reason being that he combined his remarkable intellect and energy with a selflessness and a sense of responsibility for others." Another person writes, "He made everyone he came into contact with feel special and empowered." And lastly, another person wrote, "He was a very down-to-earth and a well-grounded man with a kind word for everyone around him." Mentorship is an aspect of Professor Myosi's legacy that has to continue. In the Greek story written by Homer, Odysseus, the warrior, leaves to fight in the Trojan War, and he leaves his son, Telemachus, in the care of Mentor. Mentor's role was to educate, to protect, and to guide. In our current reality, a mentor extraordinaire has come and gone. And my question to us all today is, who will care for Telemachus now that mentor has left? Research on mentorship, mainly from the global north, shows us that about half of junior staff are unable to identify a mentor. It also shows that women and individuals from ethnically underrepresented groups tend to experience significant difficulty with finding suitable mentors. I want to say, if you do not yet have a mentor, I would like to encourage you to seek one. Having a mentor is essential. It shows you are keen to succeed and clever enough to know you need support and guidance to do so. So that's the first part of what I wanted to say. I only have two parts, don't worry. So the first part had to do with Bongani's ability to touch individual lives. We've all felt that. But there's another aspect to that legacy, and that is his ability to touch systems, to touch how things work, and in particular in research, the research system. I mean, there are so many fingerprints that we can still find of Bongani Myosi in our research system. So I just wanted to use one example where I worked with him on something, but he was the chair of the committee, and just to show you the kinds of impact that he had. So this was the Asaf committee looking at the revitalizing of clinical research in South Africa, which identified that there were really problems in our research in the clinical arena, and that various things needed to be done, and various recommendations came out of that report. As I said, Bongani was the chair of that committee, but when that process was completed, he didn't take his hands off that. He actually redoubled his efforts to make sure that those recommendations are known to everyone. He spoke to everyone that would listen, from government to the Medical Research Council, to the NRF, to various institutions, both here in South Africa and abroad. And as a result of his vision, his passion, and his drive, many of those, if not all of those recommendations have been realized. So just very quickly, and I'm not going to speak at length to this, just to point out a few examples. We talked about having a new system for regulation, planning, and coordination of clinical research. We needed to have a National Health Research Committee. Well, we have one now, and Bongani was the first chair of that committee. We talked about a new medicines regulatory authority, and we have one now. We talked about National Research Ethics Committee, and that's in place. We talked about the need to develop human resources for clinical research, the National Clinical Scholars Program, which, as you've heard now, has his name attached to it. The report that we worked on in USAF actually mentioned 500 PhDs over the next 10 years, but that wasn't good enough for Bongani, so he made it 1,000. So that is work in progress, and he has already been very successful. And so national research chairs for clinical science, as you know, that has increased. And so you could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to go through the full list. But just to show you, I mean, one of the other things he really drove is the idea that we need to increase the funding for research in South Africa. And he never stopped until he passed. He was always banging on about that with great success. So I'm going to end by just, so that report was in 2007. And more recently as last year, this report came out looking at the state of the South African research enterprise. And so I just wanted to draw on a few points from that, focusing on health research. So the point of this is to show you what has improved, but I also want to highlight the things that Bongani would have highlighted as saying, we need to work harder at this. And I want to bring home the point that now that Bongani is no longer with us, it is incumbent on us to continue to fight hard for the things that he was so passionate about. So here is just one slide about academic staff capacity. As you see, there has been some increase, annual growth rate of about 2.3% between 2000 and 2015. But so that's good, but it's not good enough, because if you think about the growth in the massification of education, our universities, the number of students, 2.3 growth rate in our permanent staff is really not much. It's actually staying on the spot. The proportion of staff with a PhD has grown from 26% to 35%. That's still below the national average. So we've got a lot of work to do there. Number of female staff with PhDs, proportion of female staff total grew from 51% to 63%. Proportion of black staff grew from 32 to 57, and the proportion of South African staff grew from 91 to 95. So that is the picture for academic capacity. Despite the fact that overall there hasn't been a massive growth in the numbers, the efficiency has certainly increased. And this shows us the publication outputs, which has increased significantly over time, but not by about 9%. But not only the numbers of publications, but also the quality of publications. So on the right, you see the proportion of papers published in higher impact journals, quartiles 1 and 2 being the highest, and that is relatively high. It's remained constant at around 63%. But then we will have challenges. So let me show you some challenges. So the question is, who is publishing? And what you see here is that although women outnumber men in the academic core, most of the publications are coming from men. There's something wrong with that, right? And so we need to diagnose and deal with this problem. Also, we look at the breakdown by race, and you can see most of the publications are coming from white. So it's mostly white men who are publishing, and that needs to be turned around. Bongani and the ASAF reports also highlighted the problem of the aging cohort, that most publications are now coming from old guys like me, and that was a worry because we really need the young Turks to come along and do the work. And the good news is that if you look at this, the bottom, you see that there is a significant increase in the number of publications from younger people. And the old guys, the yellow bit, they are kind of falling by the way, which is what you want to see. So there's been improvement there. Bongani was very passionate about doctoral studies, encouraging people to do their doctorates. And so if you look at doctoral enrollments and graduates, you'll see that enrollments have grown by 8.9%, new enrollments even higher than that, and graduates by 6.5%. That's a pleasing increase. On the right, you see the breakdown by region. And although South Africans are the majority, you will see that there's been a drop from 2000 to 2015, from 85% of the PhD to 72% going to South Africans, whereas people from other parts of Africa have grown from 13% to 22%. So again, what are we doing to try and increase the number of South Africans completing their PhDs? I think this is really the last slide on the series. So this is really about funding of research. So what is happening with funding? South Africa spent 32 billion on R&D in 2015, 2016. And that level, although it's reasonable, has remained fairly constant at about 0.8% of GDP over the course of time. Yet the South African government has set a target of 1% of GDP by 2020, and I think that is highly unlikely to happen under the current circumstances. So even 1% would be low. OECD countries spend 2.4% on average, and even our comparator countries, countries that are similar to us in terms of its research, they spend more than 1%. So that is something that we constantly have to keep working on. But I have to also acknowledge that government funding through channels like the MRC, through NRF DST, has improved. So the R&D spend has increased, government spend, from 2001 to 2015, from 36% to 45%. Okay? But business has dropped. So the business component of R&D has declined from 56% to 39%. So that is something that we need to highlight and work on. You may be interested in overseas funding. That has doubled from 6% to 13%. So ladies and gentlemen, I think you've been sitting for a long time, so I'm going to be respectful of that and just show you this last slide. What I've tried to do in this talk is really just to take one aspect of the legacy of this great man, which focused on people, either people individually or people collectively, and what he has done to try and move the dial on getting things going forward. He did this so effectively because he always thought beyond himself. He lived for a cause that was greater than himself. And that, for me, is such an important example and something that I personally want to aspire to even more now that Bongani is no longer with us. And I would encourage you to do the same. And in that, he has demonstrated more than anything else could his leadership, his potential as a leader. This quote that says, "Leadership is not about position, authority, or hierarchy. It is about choice. It is about the decision to make a meaningful difference in the world and the lives of others." And I close with the quotation from Achona Luwayo, which I really think really sums up who Bongani really was. Bless the world with your mind. Heal the world with your heart. Lift the world with your soul. Elevate the world with your life. I want to take this opportunity of thanking Nonhlanhla and the family, the Myosi family, for sharing this great man with us. He made such good use of the time that he spent with us, and we will be ever grateful to you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, for those inspirational words. Jimmy was a mentor, a friend, a colleague, and I hear also now a fellow squash player. I want to thank you all for coming today. I want to thank the family. I want to echo the words of Jimmy to thank you for sharing Bongani with us and for allowing us to celebrate this day with you, the day that is the anniversary of his birth. I had a long list of people to thank. Linda for pulling the event together, and Reese for making sure the painting was done on time. And then the Thursday or Friday morning, early morning crowd of who you know who you are. And then, but I didn't want to give you a long list. I think you've had many thank yous today. But just to say that it's been a real privilege to be part of this team. So this event marks a transition period for us as we start to move from a period of pain to a time when we can remember and celebrate Bongani and everything that he stood for. Today is a big step forward. We've heard about the Bongani Myosi Foundation, which is going to take his legacy and fly, I'm sure. We've heard the announcement that the Faculty of Health Sciences Library is going to be named after Bongani, and we really celebrate that announcement. I think it's a fitting tribute for what he represented. The library, together with the bridge that links the faculty to Groote Hospital, symbolizes the linkage of academia with clinical service and vice versa, or two mandates that were very important to Bongani's life. So as individuals, as a faculty, as a university, as a country, and colleagues globally, we will keep the legacy of Professor Bongani Myosi alive. As we walk down the corridor past the library, we will remember what he stood for. We hope that students and staff will be inspired by his words and his work, and that they will dare to dream, to have a bold Afrocentric vision for their own lives, and will follow a path that embraces his values to do good. The exhibition will remain up, and I encourage you who haven't seen it yet to have not been there to visit it. And I would like now formally to close the event and invite everybody to refreshments and food next door. Thank you.